So I'm surprised that I finally came back after a long time of not being here. Just saying. Just saying. Now, I I have this book. It is called Wait Till Helen Comes, and it comes from my school. And I already have a bookmark in it. But, ooh, thank God y'all didn't see. Now, I'm gonna read some of the pictures to y'all because I thought it was interesting. Now, I'm just gonna turn this off because there is Noah things. Okay, now let's start. You bought a church? Michael and I looked up from the pile of homework covering most of the kitchen table. I was in the middle of writing a poem for Mr. Polski's English class. I don't know how to say that. And Michael was working his way happily through 20 math questions. Okay, happily is a lie, probably. It says happily. Y'all probably can't read it because it would be backwards. No one's here. And here I thought people would be here. Okay. Mom filled a kettle with water and put it on the stove. Her cheeks were pink from the March wind, and so was the tip of her nose. Hey, it's March, so that kind of correlates. You and Molly will love it. Molly is the name of the main character, by the way. She promised. It's exactly the sort of place Dave and I have been looking for all winter. There's a carriage house for him to use as a pottery workshop and space in the choir loft for me to build up a studio. It's perfect. But how can we live in a church? Michael persisted, refusing to be won over by her enthusiasm. Fair, fair. Still no one. I'm sad. Okay. Maybe because of stuff. Oh, it's really not a church anymore, Mom said. Some people from Philadelphia bought it last year and built an addition on the side for living quarters. They were going to set up an antique store in the actual church, but after doing all that work, they decided they didn't like living in the country after all. It's out in the country? I frowned at the little cat I was doodling in the margin of my notebook paper. Mom smiled and gazed past me, out our kitchen window, and into Mr. Overton's window directly across the alley. I had a feeling she was seeing herself standing in front of an easel, working on one of her huge oil paintings, far from what she called the soul-killing life of the city. Okay, I wasn't paying attention. She has a maddening habit of drifting away into her most private dream world when you need her most. Still no one, and it's 3 minutes. And I shouldn't be expecting anything. I'm a small creator after all. I mean, I did come back for a return to read this book, but I kind of quit because I wasn't that motivated or anything. So I don't post every day, nor do I post regularly. I don't even post at all anymore on this channel. So yeah, I'm gonna mute this real quick so I can read the words. I'm just gonna do Where is the church? I asked loudly. Where is it? Mom poured boiling water into her cup and added, honey, it's in Hallwell, Maryland. It's in Hallwell, Maryland, not far from the mountains. It's beautiful. Just beautiful. The perfect place for painting and potting. Finally, someone in the live. Hello. I'm reading a book called Wait Till Heaven Comes. So thank you for being the first one. Did you say anything? No, you didn't. I'm just going to continue reading. But what about Molly and me? What are we supposed to do while you and Dave paint and make pottery? Michael asked. You promised I could be in the enrichment program this summer, I said, thinking about the creative writing class I was planning to take. Will I still be able to? Yes, and what about science club? Michael asked. I'm already signed up for it. Mr. Phillips is going to take us to the aquarium and the science center and even to the Smithsonian in Washington. Mom sighed and shook her head. I'm afraid you two will have to make other plans for summer. We'll be moving in June, and I can't possibly drive all the way back to Baltimore every day. Then don't. But I've been looking forward to science club all year. Michael's voice rose, and I could tell he was trying hard not to cry. You'll have plenty of woods to explore, Mom said calmly. Just think of all the wildlife you can observe and the insects you can add to your collection. Why, the day Day and I were there, we saw a raccoon, a possum, a woodchuck, and a dozen of squirrels. Mom leaned across the table, smiling, hoping to convince Michael that he was going to love living in a church way out in the country, miles away from Mr. Phillips and Science Club. But Michael wasn't easy to convince. Slumping down in his chair, he mumbled, I'd rather stay in Baltimore, even if I never see anything but cockroach, pigeons, and rats. Oh, for heaven's sakes, Michael. Mom looked exasperated. You're 10 years old. Act like it. As Michael opened his mouth to defend himself, Heather appeared in the kitchen doorway, responding, no doubt, to her built-in radar for detecting trouble. Her pale gray eyes hovered from Mom to Michael, then to me, then back to Mom. From the expression on her face, I imagined she was hoping to get screams and a ghastly scene of domestic violence. Damn. Why, Heather, I was wondering where you were. Mom turned to her, infusing her voice with enthusiasm again. Guess what? Your daddy and I have found a new place for us to live, way out in the country. Won't it be fun? She gave Heather a dazzling romper room smile and reached out to embrace her. With the skill of a cat, Heather stepped aside in Mom's arms and peered out the kitchen window. Daddy's home, she announced without looking at us. Oh no, I forgot to put the casserole in the oven! Mom ran to the refrigerator and pulled out a concoction of eggplant, cheese, and tomatoes and a bulgur and shoved it into the oven just as Dave opened the back door, bringing a blast of cold March air into the living room with him. After giving Mom a hug and a kiss, he swooned Heather up in his arms. How's my girl? She boomed. Heather twined her arm possessively around his neck and smiled coldly. They were fighting, she said, darting a look to Michael and me. Dave glanced at Mom, and she smiled and shook her head. We were just discussing our big move to the country, that's all. No one was fighting, Heather. Mom turned on the cold water and began rinsing lettuce leaves for a salad. I don't like it when they fight. Heather tightened her grip on Dave's neck. Come on, Michael. I stood up and started gathering my books and papers together. Let's finish our homework downstairs. Dinner will be ready in about half an hour, Mom called after us as we started down the basement steps. As soon as we were safely out of everyone's hearing range, I turned to Michael. What are we going to do? He flopped down on the old couch in front of the television. Nothing. Nothing. It's too late. Molly. Nothing. It's too late, Molly.
Who are you talking to, Leah?
Sorry about that. And no one's here again. Just great. Just great. They've bought the church and we're moving there. Period.
No.
Gathering a pillow, he tossed it across the room, narrowly missing one of Mom's paintings, a huge close-up of a sunflower. Why did she have to marry him? We were perfectly happy before he and Heather came along. I slumped beside him, nodding my head in agreement. They ruined everything. Glancing at the stairs to make sure Heather hadn't seen down to smile on us, I said, if only Heather was a normal kid. She acts more like a 2-year-old than a 7-year-old. And she's mean. She tattles and lies and does everything she can to get us in trouble with Dave. Why do they always take her side? Even Mom! Michael made a face. You know what Dave says. Making his voice deep and serious, he said, Heather is an unusually imaginative child, and she has suffered a great loss. You and Molly must be patient with her. I groaned. How long can we feel sorry for her and be nice to her? I know it must have been horrible to see her mother die in the fire and be too little help, but she was only 3 years old. She should have gotten over it by now, Michael. He nodded. If Dave would take her to a shrink, I bet she would get better. My friend Mark and little brother goes to sometimes guy out in Tosun, and it's helped him a lot. He plays with dolls and draws pictures, makes things out of clay. I sighed. You know perfectly well what Dave thinks of strings, Michael. I've heard him tell Mom that all they do is mess up your head. But Michael got up and flipped the TV to Speed Racer. With one eye on the screen, he set about doing the rest of his math while I sat there doodling more cats instead of finishing my poem. After a few minutes, I nudged Michael. Do you remember that movie we saw on TV about that little girl who did horrible things to her enemies? The Bad Seed? Yes, that was it. Well, sometimes I think Heather's like that girl, Rhoda. Suppose she burned her mother on purpose the way Rhoda burned up the janitor. Michael peered at me over the top of his glasses. You're crazy, Molly. No 3-year-old kid could do something like that. He was speaking to me as he was a scientist, explaining something to a child instead of a 10-year-old kid boy addressing his 12-year-old sister. Realizing how ridiculous I sounded, I laughed and said, just kidding, but I really wasn't. There was something about Heather that made me truly uncomfortable. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't even like her, let alone love her, as Mom kept urging me to. It was hard to feel pity or anything but dislike for her. It wasn't as I hadn't tried. When Heather had first moved in, I'd done everything I could. I've done everything I could think of to be a good big sister. But she just made it clear she wanted nothing to do with me. If I tried to comb her hair, she pulled away, crying to Mom that I was hurting her. If I offered to read to her, she'd run after the first sentence or two and say the story was boring and dumb. Once I made the mistake of letting her play with my old Barbie dolls, the one I was saving for my children, she cut off their hair playing beauty parlor and risked their best outfits. She even tore up a family of paper dolls I made for her. She's a menace, taking great pleasure in beheading them right in front of me. Then she dropped the distastefully in the trash can and walked out the room. Okay, that's pure evil. I would say so. No one. Okay, to make it even worse, she told lies about Michael and me, making it sound like if we tormented her whenever we were alone with her. Dave believed her most of the time, and too. In the 6 months that Mom and Dave have been married, things have gotten very tense in our home, and as far as I could see, Heather was responsible for most of the bad feelings, and now we were moving to a little church in the country where we would be no escape, where there would be no escape from her all summer. Was it any wonder that I was depressed? I don't think you can get depression over that. Just saying. But if she tortured you, basically, then yeah, I would say that's depression. And you're sad about it, like really sad about it. And it's just many different days of where, oh my, forgot. I need to move it. I glanced at Michael, still hard at work on his math. My own poem was now almost absurd by the cats I've drawn over the notebook paper. I stared at it sadly, no longer in the mood to continue writing about unicorns, rainbows, and castles in the cloud. Tearing it out of my notebook, I crumpled it into a ball and tossed it at Speed Racer as he zipped past in his little car. Then I began writing a poem about real life, something depressing, dealing with loneliness and unhappiness and the misery of being misunderstood and unloved. And that was one chapter, my friends. Now, Now, if anyone actually cared to actually listen to me read, thank you. But I think I'm gonna call it quits because only one person came and then they left. Goodbye. I'm not gonna be reading